Welcome back to Askewed Reviews. And throughout this week, I'm doing a film series in honor of the passing of the late great Tony Todd, and that is the Candyman film series. And today I'm doing the 1995 film Candyman Farewell to the Flesh. Here is your trivia question for today. What is the name of the radio host that essentially narrates throughout the film? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So, in the second film, Candyman Farewell to the Flesh, we move from Chicago, Illinois to where Candyman originated, New Orleans, Louisiana. We catch up with the returning character of Professor Purcell, who has written a book about the mythos of the Candyman. Now, Purcell ends up having a meeting with Ethan Tarrant, who blames the professor for his father's death. After a heated exchange, they end up going their separate ways. But unfortunately for the professor, he ends up running into the Candyman. With Ethan being the last person to see him alive and having that heated exchange, he is now the prime suspect. Now, Ethan's sister Annie believes that he is innocent and is going to figure out what happened. All of the evidence seems to point back to one thing: the urban legend known as the Candyman. Annie, of course, does not take it seriously, which ends up causing the Candyman to be summoned and is now following Annie around. So with all of those in her life no longer being safe, will she make the ultimate sacrifice and willingly give herself to be the next victim for the Candyman? Now, where they got the subtitle for the film Candyman Farewell to the Flesh is due to the fact that the movie takes place during Mardi Gras, which is also a carnival. And since the word carnival comes from the Latin phrase carne levere, which means remove meat, it also does come from carne veil, which means farewell to meat. This movie was directed by Bill Condon. They were originally going to bring back Bernard Rose, who directed and co-wrote the first film, but they ended up rejecting both of his script ideas. His original concept was a prequel that would have been the gothic love story between Daniel and Caroline, and about how eventually it led to Daniel becoming the Candyman. The second concept was to actually move the Candyman films into not actually having the Candyman in them. Instead, the series would have explored the nature of urban horror myths. The closest one of these ideas of Rose's came to being made was a sequel called Candyman 2: The Midnight Meat Train. It would have taken place in London in the 1990s and had a Jack the Ripper style antagonist, but this all would have primarily taken place in the subway. The producers ended up turning down this idea though, as they felt that the audience would not show up to a Candyman movie if Candyman was not in it. Probably one of the biggest issues this movie had to deal with was timing, due to the fact that all of the marketing and advertising seemed to show a white woman being stalked by a black man. And right around this time, the O.J. Simpson trial was ongoing. Tony Todd, of course, came back to reprise his role as the Candyman, which was definitely a good choice, due to the fact that he was the best part of this movie. Kelly Rowan was brought in to play the character of Annie Tarrant. Now, I don't think that Rowan did a bad job. It almost felt like a cut and paste of the character of Helen from the first film. Now, apparently this role was originally offered to Tuesday Night. She has actually stated that she regrets turning down this one horror movie role. Aside from Tony Todd, the only other returning cast member from the first film is Michael Culkin reprising his role of Professor Purcell. Did you happen to notice the small reference to the Halloween series in this film? Well, Octavia Tarrant mentions that her physician is named Dr. Loomis. This is, of course, a reference to the character played by Donald Pleasance throughout some of the Halloween films. The majority of this movie was filmed in Louisiana, with some sequences in California. So me personally, I'm going to count the body count for this film as 8. You of course have Professor Purcell right near the beginning, Paul McKeever, Mr. Thibodeau, Detective Levesque, which thank goodness, Ethan Tarrant, Octavia Tarrant. There's a flashback to Coleman Tarrant's death, and even though he is Candyman, technically we do see the death of Daniel Robitaille. So when it comes to the film Candyman Farewell to the Flesh, This one was still good, but I just felt like they didn't change pretty much anything other than the location. It felt very much the same as the first film, so they didn't try anything different or new. So that's why I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 5. Now, if you enjoyed this one, other movies I recommend checking out are Hellraiser, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, and Malignant. Now it's time to answer the trivia question from the beginning of this episode. What is the name of the radio host that essentially narrates throughout the film? Now, at one point in the film, during the carnival, you can actually see the radio host. However, though, the physical actor and the voice actor were two completely different people. But that radio host was called the Kingfish. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews. And if there's a movie that you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments.